Hello again, and for today I have a brand new video since my 100th Raw commentary. This will be 101, and I'm really excited to do this because at the time I was trying to get this done in the middle of my big pandemic push to create more content, but certain events have happened recently that have really shown me what it takes to kill a city. And as a result, I can now deliver this commentary as I wanted to initially when I thought of the idea just by writing down the title. So, in this commentary, I want to focus on why I think cities are failing and what may be able to be done in order to stop them from failing, but there's a lot to kind of go over, kind of unpack, and so I will have to make this as concise as I possibly can in order to effectively communicate these ideas. So, for me, what a city really embodies is not only the pinnacle of industrialization, the pinnacle of modernity. It is also the epicenter of culture. You know, when people want to experience the modern culture of a country or of a group, they will go to the city first and then travel back in time by going towards the more rural areas. Specifically, you see this in New York City, that this is exactly the city that has birthed so many cultural movements throughout the years. You know, you got the Harlem Renaissance, the New York punk scene, fucking, so many art movements beyond that. And it's just incredible to me to watch, again, the degeneration of the city as we continue to go through the decay of urban living. So, what happens to kind of facilitate the downfall of any city and leading to its inevitable death? Well, I think the starting point is when the realtors try to bite off more than they can chew and end up destroying property value by raising it so high that it's impossible for average people to buy apartments. You see this in lots of cities. The reason why there's so much flight out of San Francisco, I think, is not just the homeless problem, but it is also the fact that, you can only get, multiple $1,000 apartments that are beyond a single $1,000, and that would be considered cheap. So, to me, if you recoil at those kinds of numbers, that is the starting point of when a city begins to downfall. The next thing that I think is super responsible for all this is the enacting of more progressive policies in local city government. You see this in San Francisco, you see this in Seattle, you see this in Portland, and now you're seeing it in New York with de Blasio. The pushing of progressive values and progressive ideas, for some reason, just totally fucking capsizes these cities into being these havens of the Democratic Party. And yet, things get worse. It's like Giuliani was a conservative through and through, and his tough on crime stance cleaned up New York City so well that, it became a family-friendly place to go visit Times Square, which barely like 50 years ago was filled with hookers, porno theaters, fucking pimps and prostitutes, which are also hookers, and drug dealers, just openly, and fucking squatters in the theaters. So, it's beyond amazing what a conservative can do to clean up a city. But more on that later. the third thing that I think is a key to the degeneration of any city is when culture itself degenerates. You know, when the tolerance for bad things gets lower and lower, you know, when crime becomes more tolerated, when fucking degenerate acts become more tolerated, when culture itself is just empty hedonism, then what's the point of having an upstanding society that is the pinnacle of all humanity? You know, at that point, it just degenerates and devolves into lawless anarchy as well as just empty hedonism. And so these three things start the ball rolling. And what pushes it further, as we've seen with these Black Lives Matter riots, is that racial tensions will arise. You know, when you have diverse groups of people living together, at a certain point they will stop tolerating each other because they have become so tribalistic in their legally segregated communities. You know, there are so many blocks of, or not so many blocks, so many neighborhoods in New York that are just black or just Hispanic or just Hasidic. Like, they are just constantly in conflict with one another, living on top of each other and not really getting along as well as they could be. And when these racial tensions arise, you know, that's when shit starts to really hit the fan. And it then leads into some other stuff, like the police force getting defunded because, oh, I don't know, police are just too violent. They're just too brutal. And it's like, yes, there are instances of police brutality that should be addressed as instances, as a case-by-case basis. But to blanket wash all police brutality or all uses of force by police as police brutality, this is what causes police forces to get defunded by these progressive governments, which in turn will then fuel the lawless anarchy. And what I think really pushes cities from the brink of salvation, beyond all of what I've just said, is the hegemonic progressive thought that dominates these fucking people. It dominates their worldview. And as a result, you know, you see that they have no real solutions that are different from their norm, because their norm dominates their life and they can't think outside the box anymore. And because of this, there are no real solutions, and it might be time for them to leave. So, what are the solutions to saving a city from chaos and destruction, which is what all of these points lead to? One would have to be voting in someone who's tough on crime, voting in a conservative, voting someone who understands why we need the rule of law, someone who understands why culture is important in a city, someone who understands that, you know, if realtors destroy the property value, it's just a slippery slope into the city destroying itself from there. And if these solutions cannot be enacted through voting, well, it might be time for you to leave. And that's what I discovered when I tried to live in New York City. That's what I have discovered through watching my friends live in a certain city in the country that I might move to, is that they are just essentially voting in the same shit that ruined places that they probably would have moved to instead. And it's disgusting. I can't stand the cognitive dissonance that these people are currently suffering. Like, it really boggles my mind as to why this kind of shit constantly happens. But it probably has a lot to do with the hegemonic thought of progressivism, where you have to follow the orthodoxy, and if you don't, you're the one at fault. And until young people realize that this progressive shit doesn't work, lots of cities might fall, and it's just going to be a really bad time for everyone involved. And I dread the day that will come if any of that happens. But I am just one man, I am just one YouTube account. I am just one content creator. I can't really do it all. And at some point, everyone has to take a stand and say, hey, this progressive shit that you've pushed time and time again, it doesn't fucking work. So why don't you shut up and maybe read some books? So I think that's going to wrap it up for this commentary. I really worry about the future of American cities, as you know, more of these race riots will come in the future if racial tensions are not solved. I worry that realtors will just be too fucking greedy. I mean, the fact that there is still a predatory real estate industry of people who are only into being realtors in order to make fucking bank really concerns me, not only just for the future of American cities, but the future of the entire country. I mean, what happens when they run out of land? You know, they're just going to start going into the suburbs and then going into the rural areas. And you do not want these kinds of fucking realty firms to be dominating property. You don't, okay? It just drives up the prices every fucking time. You know, the more locally owned shit there is, the better off we will be. And, you know, I've seen certain conservatives like Mindy Wheeler coming out with her 501c3 nonprofit, Conservatives in the Arts, and it's really got me motivated to try and join the organization. But at the same time, I am concerned that it might not be enough. You know, it might not be enough to save culture from absolutely fucking imploding on itself. And, you know, the more people like Angry Joe talk about a quote-unquote agenda, the more people will actually look into what that agenda is. But, nigga, you gotta start naming them, right? It is time to name them. And maybe that will be a commentary in the future, where I just call on people who have been canceled to name who canceled them. But I am not a prophet. I just kind of go back into old commentaries and see what I have to do in the future, if it will work or not. So, again, to all the progressives, all of the neoliberals, all of the people who, especially realtors. Sorry, I forgot realtors. All of you people who fucking ruin cities, drive them into the ground, create just total states of urban decay, well, you better tread lightly, because the population that lives in that city will more than likely rise up against you.